The prophecy of Isaiah 17, found in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, is a significant passage that has captivated theologians, historians, and believers for centuries due to its vivid prediction of the destruction of Damascus, the capital of Syria. The text declares, "See, Damascus will no longer be a city, but will become a heap of ruins. The cities of Aroer will be deserted and left to flocks, which will lie down with no one to make them afraid. The fortified city will disappear from Ephraim, and royal power from Damascus." This prophecy, attributed to the prophet Isaiah, who ministered in Judah during the 8th century BCE, has sparked debates about its historical fulfillment and potential future significance. To understand its implications, we must explore the historical context of the prophecy, the geopolitical dynamics of the ancient Near East, and its theological interpretations, particularly in light of modern events in 2025. Isaiah 17 is part of a series of oracles against various nations in the book of Isaiah, chapters 13 to 23, which address the fates of Israel's neighbors and adversaries. The prophecy specifically targets Damascus, the capital of the Aramean kingdom, and Ephraim, a term used for the northern kingdom of Israel. Unlike many ancient cities that vanished after conquest, Damascus has persisted through millennia, raising questions about whether Isaiah 17 was fulfilled historically, or if it points to a future event. The text also connects to other prophetic passages, such as Jeremiah 49 verse 23 to 27, and Amos 1 verse 3 to 5, which similarly predict judgment on Damascus, reinforcing the significance of this prophecy within the biblical narrative. The text describes a catastrophic judgment where Damascus will cease to function as a city, reduced to rubble, and the surrounding regions, including Aroer and Ephraim, will face desolation. The passage also speaks of a diminished remnant of Aram, likening its fate to that of Israel. "In that day the glory of Jacob will fade, the fat of his body will waste away." This suggests a shared judgment on both Aram and Israel, likely due to their alliances and opposition to God's covenant people in Judah. The prophecy is notable for its vivid imagery and its focus on Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. To grasp the meaning of Isaiah 17, we must examine the historical setting of the 8th century BCE, a period marked by intense geopolitical rivalry in the Near East. During this time, the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, led by kings such as Rezin, was a significant regional power. This alliance, known as the Syro-Ephraimite coalition, sought to pressure Judah, ruled by King Ahaz, into joining their resistance against Assyria. The city was not reduced to a heap of ruins, as described in the prophecy. Instead, it was rebuilt and continued to serve as an administrative center under Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, and later empires. This continuity has led scholars to debate whether Isaiah 17 was fully fulfilled in the 8th century BCE, or if it anticipates a future destruction. When Ahaz refused, Aram and Israel attacked Judah, an event known as the Syro-Ephraimite War. Judah's refusal to join the coalition led Ahaz to seek Assyrian aid, a decision that had profound consequences. The Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III intervened, crushing the Syro-Ephraimite coalition. In 732 BCE, Assyria conquered Damascus, killed Rezin, and annexed Aram, while Israel faced severe losses and eventual destruction in 722 BC. Damascus was a hub of trade and culture, strategically located along major trade routes connecting Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Levant. The Arameans frequently clashed with the northern kingdom of Israel, but they also formed alliances against common threats, particularly the rising Assyrian Empire. In the years leading up to 732 BCE, Israel, under King Pekah, and Aram, under King Rezin, formed a coalition to resist Assyrian expansion. The Assyrian conquest of Damascus is often cited as a potential fulfillment of Isaiah 17. However, historical records indicate that while Damascus was sacked and its population deported. While Isaiah 17 primarily focuses on Aram and Israel, the broader historical context includes Persia, the ancient predecessor of modern Iran. During Isaiah's time, Persia was not yet a dominant power, as its rise under Cyrus the Great occurred later in the 6th century BCE. However, Persia's later interactions with the region provide a historical parallel to modern Iran's role in the Middle East. After conquering Babylon in 539 BCE, Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This act of benevolence contrasts with Persia's military campaigns against other nations, such as Greece, illustrating its complex role in the ancient world. The historical interactions between Aram, Israel, and Persia highlight a recurring pattern of alliances and conflicts in the region. Aram and Israel's coalition against Assyria mirrors modern alliances, such as the Iran-Syria partnership, which has been a cornerstone of Iran's regional strategy in 2025. Just as ancient Persia influenced the Levant through diplomacy and conquest, modern Iran's support for Syria and proxy groups like Hezbollah reflects a continuation of regional power dynamics. Theological interpretations of Isaiah 17 vary widely within Christian scholarship. Some scholars argue that the prophecy was fulfilled in 732 BCE with the Assyrian conquest of Damascus. They point to the historical record of Aram's defeat and the subsequent weakening of Israel as evidence of fulfillment. Others, particularly those with an eschatological perspective, contend that the prophecy has a dual or future fulfillment. The fact that Damascus remains a functioning city suggests to these scholars that Isaiah 17 may point to a cataclysmic event in the end times, possibly linked to other prophecies, such as Ezekiel 38 to 39, which describe a coalition, including Persia, attacking Israel. The concept of dual fulfillment is common in biblical prophecy, where a near-term event partially fulfills the prophecy while pointing to a greater future fulfillment. For example, the prophecy of Emmanuel in Isaiah 7 verse 14 is seen as fulfilled in Isaiah's time, but also in the birth of Jesus Christ. Similarly, Isaiah 17's description of Damascus as a heap of ruins may have been partially fulfilled in the Assyrian conquest, but could await a more complete fulfillment in a future conflict. The enduring significance of Isaiah 17 lies in its potential relevance to contemporary events, particularly the Iran-Israel conflict and Syria's role as Iran's ally. The collapse of the Assad regime in December 2024 has destabilized Syria, creating a power vacuum that could draw in regional powers like Israel, Iran, Russia, and Turkey. The Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus in April 2024, which killed senior Iranian officials, underscored Syria's strategic importance and raised questions about whether such events could escalate into the catastrophic destruction described in Isaiah 17. While the consulate attack did not reduce Damascus to ruins, it highlighted the city's vulnerability in the ongoing Iran-Israel conflict. The cessation of hostilities in 2025, coupled with Israel's interest in establishing diplomatic ties with Syria and Lebanon, suggests a potential for stabilization. However, the region's volatility means that renewed conflict could thrust Syria into the center of a broader war, aligning with the imagery of Isaiah 17. The Middle East in 2025 remains a volatile region, shaped by the ongoing rivalry between Iran and Israel, the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, and the shifting dynamics of regional alliances. The conflict between Iran and Israel, which escalated dramatically in 2024, has drawn significant attention to Syria, Iran's long-standing ally, and raised questions about its potential role in fulfilling biblical prophecies, such as the destruction of Damascus described in Isaiah 17 verse 1 to 3. This section provides an in-depth analysis of the geopolitical landscape in 2025, focusing on the Iran-Israel conflict, Syria's instability following the fall of Assad, the role of proxy forces, and the broader implications for regional stability. By examining these developments, we can assess whether current events align with the prophetic imagery of Isaiah 17 and explore the interplay of modern geopolitics with historical and theological perspectives. The Iran-Israel conflict reached a critical juncture in April 2024 when Israel conducted a targeted airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus, Syria, killing several high-ranking Iranian military officials. This attack marked a significant escalation as it directly targeted Iranian assets on Syrian soil, signaling Israel's intent to disrupt Iran's regional influence. Iran retaliated with a large-scale drone and missile attack on Israel, prompting a 12-day war that saw intense exchanges of fire. By early 2025, a fragile ceasefire has been established, mediated by international actors, but tensions remain high, with both nations maintaining robust military postures. The consulate attack underscored Syria's role as a strategic hub for Iran, as operations in the Levant. Iran has long used Syria as a conduit for supplying weapons to proxy groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and for maintaining a forward base against Israel. The destruction of the consulate, while not reducing Damascus to the heap of ruins described in Isaiah 17 verse 1, highlighted the city's vulnerability in the broader Iran-Israel conflict. The ceasefire in 2025 has temporarily de-escalated direct hostilities, but the underlying issues Israel has determination to curb Iran's nuclear ambitions, and Iran's commitment to supporting anti-Israel factions persist, raising the risk of renewed conflict. A pivotal development in the Middle East in 2025 is the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, which occurred in December 2024. For decades, the Assad government was Iran's closest ally in the region, providing a critical link in the so-called axis of resistance that includes Iran, Hezbollah, and other proxy groups. While the city has not been reduced to ruins as described in Isaiah 17, the ongoing chaos, coupled with the damage from years of civil war and recent escalations, has weakened its infrastructure and governance. The power vacuum has also emboldened various factions, including remnants of opposition groups and foreign-backed militias, further complicating Syria's future. The absence of a strong central government makes Syria a potential flashpoint for regional conflicts, particularly if Iran seeks to regain its influence or if Israel intensifies operations to prevent hostile groups from filling the void. The fall of Assad, driven by internal dissent and external pressures, has significantly weakened Iran's strategic position. Syria, now mired in a power vacuum, faces competing influences from regional powers such as Turkey, Russia, and Israel, as well as non-state actors vying for control. The collapse of Assad has left Damascus and other Syrian cities in a state of heightened instability. Iran's regional strategy has heavily relied on proxy forces, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, to project power and challenge Israel. However, both groups have suffered significant setbacks by 2025. Hezbollah, which once maintained a formidable presence in southern Lebanon and parts of Syria, has been severely weakened by Israeli military operations and internal Lebanese political strife. Hamas, similarly, has been nearly dismantled following sustained Israeli campaigns in Gaza. These losses have curtailed Iran's ability to wage proxy warfare, forcing it to rely on more direct measures, as seen in its 2024 missile attacks. The decline of these proxy forces has direct implications for Syria. With Hezbollah's reduced capacity, Iran's ability to maintain a military presence in Syria has diminished, leaving Damascus and other key areas vulnerable to external intervention. This vulnerability aligns with the imagery of Isaiah 17, which describes a weakened Aram alongside a fading Israel. While the modern context differs, the loss of Iran's proxies and Syria as central government mirrors the prophecy's depiction of a region in decline, raising questions about whether these events could be precursors to a larger cataclysm. The fall of Assad and the Iran-Israel conflict have reshaped the Middle East's geopolitical landscape. Israel, emboldened by its military successes and the weakening of Iran's regional network, is exploring new diplomatic opportunities. Turkey, meanwhile, is focused on countering Kurdish groups in northern Syria and may exploit the power vacuum to expand its control. These competing interests create a volatile environment where miscalculations could lead to renewed conflict. For instance, a Turkish or Russian intervention could draw Israel into deeper involvement in Syria, potentially targeting Damascus to neutralize threats. In June 2025, Israeli officials expressed interest in establishing diplomatic ties with Syria and Lebanon, leveraging the power vacuum in Syria to foster new alliances. In 2025, U.S. forces participated in strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, aligning closely with Israel's objectives. This involvement underscores America's commitment to curbing Iran's influence, but it also raises the stakes for Syria, which could become a proxy battleground if tensions escalate. The interplay of these powers, Israel, Russia, Turkey, and the United States, creates a complex web of alliances and rivalries that could either stabilize or destabilize Syria further. This move, if successful, could stabilize the region by integrating Syria into a broader framework of cooperation, potentially reducing the risk of conflict escalation. However, several factors complicate this prospect. Russia, a longtime backer of the Assad regime, seeks to maintain its influence in Syria through military bases and political leverage. The United States also plays a significant role in the region. The current situation in the Middle East, particularly the instability in Syria and the Iran-Israel conflict, has led some to draw parallels with Isaiah 17's prophecy of Damascus's destruction. Some scholars argue that Isaiah 17 was fulfilled historically with the Assyrian conquest of Damascus in 732 BCE, while others see the current instability as a potential precursor to a future fulfillment. The reference to Ephraim's decline in Isaiah 17 verse 3 could also be interpreted as a metaphor for the weakening of Israel's adversaries, such as Iran's proxy network in the modern context. However, caution is warranted, as linking specific events to biblical prophecy risks oversimplification. The consulate attack in 2024, while significant, did not fulfill the prophecy's description of Damascus as a heap of ruins. However, the ongoing chaos in Syria, exacerbated by the fall of Assad, creates conditions where a major conflict could potentially lead to such an outcome. For example, if Israel were to target Syrian military or chemical weapons facilities in response to threats from hostile factions, the resulting destruction could align with the prophecy's imagery. Theological perspectives on this connection vary. The prophecy of Isaiah 17, with its vivid prediction of Damascus becoming a heap of ruins, holds a significant place in Christian theology, sparking diverse interpretations about its fulfillment and relevance to contemporary events. As the Middle East faces heightened instability in 2025, particularly with the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria and the ongoing Iran-Israel conflict, many theologians and believers revisit Isaiah 17 to discern its implications. This section provides an expanded theological analysis of Isaiah 17, exploring its historical, eschatological, and dual fulfillment interpretations, its connections to other biblical prophecies, and its potential resonance with modern geopolitical developments. By examining these perspectives, we aim to understand how this ancient text informs Christian thought and its possible application to the volatile Middle Eastern landscape of 2025. One prominent theological interpretation posits that Isaiah 17 was fulfilled in the 8th century BCE during the Assyrian conquest of Damascus in 732 BCE. The prophecy, delivered by Isaiah during a period of regional turmoil, targeted the Aramean kingdom and its capital, Damascus, along with the northern kingdom of Israel. While the city was conquered and its population deported, It was rebuilt and continued as a significant center under subsequent empires, including the Persians, Greeks, and Romans. This continuity leads some scholars to argue that the prophecy was fulfilled in a limited sense, with the heap of ruins language serving as hyperbolic imagery common in biblical oracles to emphasize divine judgment. This perspective emphasizes the immediate historical context, viewing Isaiah 17 as a warning to Judah against trusting in alliances with nations like Aram, which faced God's judgment for their rebellion. The text describes the destruction of Damascus and the desolation of surrounding areas, stating, "The cities of Aroer will be deserted and left to flocks, which will lie down, with no one to make them afraid." Historically, the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III defeated the Syro-Ephraimite coalition, which included Aram and Israel, sacking Damascus and killing King Rezin. This event aligns with the prophecy's depiction of judgment on Aram and Ephraim. However, proponents of the historical fulfillment view acknowledge a challenge. Damascus was not entirely reduced to ruins, as Isaiah 17 verse 1 suggests. In contrast, many contemporary theologians, particularly those with an eschatological focus, argue that Isaiah 17 awaits a future fulfillment, possibly in the context of end times events. This view is rooted in the observation that Damascus remains a functioning city in 2025, despite its historical conquests and recent instability. The prophecy as stark imagery of a city ceasing to exist suggests a cataclysmic event beyond what occurred in 732 BCE. Proponents of this interpretation often connect Isaiah 17 to other end times prophecies, such as Ezekiel 38 to 39, which describe a coalition, including Persia, attacking Israel. The reference to Ephraim's decline in Isaiah 17 verse 3 is seen as a potential metaphor for the weakening of Israel as adversaries, including modern Syria and its allies. The eschatological perspective gains traction among those observing the Middle East's volatility in 2025, particularly the fall of the Assad regime in December 2024 and the Iran-Israel conflict. The Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus in April 2024, while not destroying the city, heightened speculation that Syria could become a focal point for a larger conflict. Some theologians suggest that a future war, possibly involving Israel, Iran, or other regional powers, could lead to the catastrophic destruction of Damascus, aligning with Isaiah 17's imagery. This view is popular among dispensationalist scholars who see current events as precursors to apocalyptic scenarios described in Revelation and Daniel. Isaiah 17 does not exist in isolation, but connects to other Old Testament prophecies about Damascus and the broader region. Jeremiah 49 verse 23 to 27 predicts distress in Damascus, with fire consuming its fortresses, while Amos 1 verse 3 to 5 condemns Damascus for its sins, foretelling exile for its people. For instance, the mention of Persia in Ezekiel 38 verse 5 aligns with Iran's modern role as Syria's ally, prompting speculation that a future Iran-Israel conflict could involve Damascus in a way that fulfills Isaiah 17. However, theologians caution against overly literal connections, noting that biblical prophecies often use symbolic language and may not map directly onto specific modern events. These passages reinforce the theme of divine judgment on Aram, suggesting a pattern of accountability for nations opposing God's purposes. Additionally, Ezekiel 38 to 39's prophecy of a coalition led by Gog, including Persia, has led some to link Isaiah 17 to a future conflict involving Iran, Syria, and other nations against Israel. The interplay of these prophecies informs theological interpretations of Isaiah 17. Isaiah 17 does not exist in isolation, but connects to other Old Testament prophecies about Damascus and the broader region. Jeremiah 49 verse 23 to 27 predicts distress in Damascus, with fire consuming its fortresses, while Amos 1 verse 3 to 5 condemns Damascus for its sins, foretelling exile for its people. For instance, the mention of Persia in Ezekiel 38 verse 5 aligns with Iran's modern role as Syria as ally, prompting speculation that a future Iran-Israel conflict could involve Damascus in a way that fulfills Isaiah 17. However, theologians caution against overly literal connections, noting that biblical prophecies often use symbolic language and may not map directly onto specific modern events. These passages reinforce the theme of divine judgment on Aram, suggesting a pattern of accountability for nations opposing God's purposes. Additionally, Ezekiel 38 to 39's prophecy of a coalition led by Gog, including Persia, has led some to link Isaiah 17 to a future conflict involving Iran, Syria, and other nations against Israel. The interplay of these prophecies informs theological interpretations of Isaiah 17. The prophecy of Isaiah 17, which foretells the destruction of Damascus and the decline of Ephraim, is deeply rooted in the historical context of the ancient Near East during the 8th century BCE. This period was marked by complex interactions among regional powers, including Aram, Israel, Judah, and the emerging influence of Persia. By examining these historical dynamics, we can draw parallels to the contemporary Middle Eastern landscape in 2025, particularly the ongoing Iran-Israel conflict and Syria's instability following the collapse of the Assad regime. This section explores the historical interactions between Aram, Israel, and Persia, compares them to modern geopolitical developments, and assesses how these parallels illuminate the potential relevance of Isaiah 17 to current events. The analysis highlights recurring patterns of alliances, conflicts, and power shifts that connect the ancient world to the volatile Middle East of today. In the 8th century BCE, the Aramean kingdom of Damascus, under King Rezin, and the northern kingdom of Israel, under King Pekah, formed a strategic alliance to counter the growing threat of the Assyrian Empire. This coalition, known as the Syro-Ephraimite Alliance, aimed to resist Assyrian expansion under Tiglath-Pileser III. The alliance also sought to pressure Judah, ruled by King Ahaz, to join their cause against Assyria. When Ahaz refused, Aram and Israel attacked Judah, initiating the Syro-Ephraimite War. This conflict is central to the context of Isaiah 17, which predicts judgment on both Damascus and Ephraim for their rebellion and reliance on human alliances rather than God. The Assyrian response was swift and devastating. In 732 BCE, Tiglath-Pileser III conquered Damascus, killed Rezin, and annexed Aram into the Assyrian Empire. Israel faced a similar fate, with its capital Samaria falling in 722 BCE. While Damascus was sacked, it was not reduced to the heap of ruins described in Isaiah 17 verse 1, as the city was rebuilt and continued as a regional center. This partial fulfillment has led scholars to debate whether the prophecy was fully realized or if it points to a future event. The Syro-Ephraimite War underscores the fragility of regional alliances and the consequences of opposing a dominant power, themes that resonate with modern Middle Eastern dynamics. Although Persia was not a major power during Isaiah's time, its later rise under Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BCE significantly shaped the region. Israel and Persia reflects a pattern of shifting alliances and conflicts. Aram and Israel's coalition against Assyria mirrors modern partnerships, such as the Iran-Syria alliance, which has faced opposition from Israel and Western powers. Persia's later dominance in the region, particularly its control over former Aramean territories, foreshadows Iran's strategic use of Syria as a base for operations in the Levant today. After conquering Babylon in 539 BCE, Cyrus issued a decree allowing Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. This act of benevolence contrasted with Persia's military campaigns against other nations, such as Greece, highlighting its dual role as both a liberator and a conqueror. Persia's interactions with the Levant, including Aram and Judah, established it as a key player in regional politics, a role that parallels modern Iran's influence in Syria and the broader Middle East. The historical relationship between Aram. The modern alliance between Iran and Syria, particularly under the Assad regime until its collapse in December 2024, closely parallels the ancient Syro-Ephraimite coalition. For decades, Syria served as Iran's key ally in the Levant, providing a conduit for weapons to Hezbollah in Lebanon and a forward base for operations against Israel. This partnership, often termed the Axis of Resistance, aimed to counter Israeli and Western influence, much like Aram and Israel sought to resist Assyria. The collapse of the Assad regime has disrupted this alliance, leaving Iran weakened and Syria in a state of chaos, reminiscent of the historical fall of Damascus to Assyria. The 2024 Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus, which killed senior Iranian officials, echoes the ancient conflicts where regional powers targeted strategic centers. While the attack did not destroy Damascus, it highlighted the city's vulnerability and its role as a flashpoint in the Iran-Israel rivalry. The subsequent 12-day war and fragile ceasefire in 2025 underscore the ongoing tension, with Syria caught in the crossfire, much like Aram was during the Assyrian campaigns. Israel's actions in 2025 mirror Judah's historical strategy of seeking security through decisive action against threats. Just as Ahaz appealed to Assyria to counter the Syro-Ephraimite coalition, Israel has aligned with Western powers, particularly the United States, to neutralize Iran's influence. The U.S. participation in strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in 2025 parallels Assyria's intervention in the 8th century BCE, where an external power decisively altered the regional balance. Israel's interest in establishing diplomatic ties with Syria and Lebanon following Assad's fall reflects a pragmatic approach to capitalize on Syria's power vacuum, akin to Judah's navigation of regional politics in Isaiah's time. The involvement of external powers in Syria today, Russia, Turkey, and the United States parallels the influence of empires like Assyria and later Persia in the ancient Near East. Russia, a longtime supporter of Assad, seeks to maintain its military bases in Syria, while Turkey aims to counter Kurdish groups and expand its influence. These competing interests create a volatile environment, much like the rivalries among Assyria, Aram, and Israel. The power vacuum in Syria following Assad's collapse invites intervention, potentially escalating conflicts in ways that could align with Isaiah 17 as imagery of Damascus as destruction. The parallels between ancient and modern events highlight the enduring strategic significance of Damascus and the Levant. While the Assyrian conquest partially fulfilled Isaiah 17, the prophecy's description of a city reduced to ruins suggests a more catastrophic event that has not yet occurred. The instability in Syria in 2025, coupled with the Iran-Israel conflict, creates conditions where such an outcome is conceivable, particularly if a major war targets Damascus's strategic assets, such as military or chemical weapons facilities. However, the prophecy's primary theological message, warning against reliance on human alliances, remains relevant, urging caution and drawing direct parallels to modern events. The historical interactions among Aram, Israel, and Persia in the ancient Near East provide a framework for understanding the modern dynamics of the Iran-Syria-Israel triangle. The Syro-Ephraimite coalition's failure against Assyria parallels the weakening of the Iran-Syria alliance following Assad's fall. Israel's strategic maneuvers, supported by external powers, echo Judah's historical reliance on Assyria. These parallels underscore the cyclical nature of conflict in the Levant, with Damascus as a perennial focal point. While the events of 2025 do not yet fulfill Isaiah 17's prophecy, they highlight the region's volatility and the potential for significant upheaval, inviting further reflection on the interplay of history, prophecy, and geopolitics. The Middle East in 2025 stands at a critical juncture, shaped by the recent collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, the fragile ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and the shifting dynamics of regional power. The prophecy of Isaiah 17, which predicts Damascus becoming a heap of ruins, provides a theological lens through which some interpret these developments, particularly given Syria's strategic role in the Iran-Israel conflict. This section explores potential future scenarios for the Middle East, focusing on Syria's trajectory, the implications of the Iran-Israel ceasefire, and the roles of external powers such as Russia, Turkey, and the United States. By analyzing these factors, we assess how current events might align with or diverge from the imagery of Isaiah 17, offering a balanced perspective that integrates geopolitical analysis, historical patterns, and theological considerations. Potential scenarios for the Middle East. Scenario 1. Stabilization through diplomacy. One possible future for the Middle East involves sustained diplomatic efforts to stabilize the region following the collapse of the Assad regime. In June 2025, Israel expressed interest in establishing diplomatic ties with Syria and Lebanon, capitalizing on the power vacuum left by Assad's fall. The ceasefire between Iran and Israel, if maintained, would reduce the likelihood of direct conflict, allowing Syria to transition toward stability. However, challenges remain, including the need to address competing factions within Syria and the influence of external powers like Russia and Turkey. This scenario aligns with the biblical call for trust in divine guidance over human alliances, as successful diplomacy would require humility and cooperation among nations. If successful, this initiative could lead to a new regional framework, with Syria potentially aligning with moderate Arab states under Israeli and Western influence. Such an outcome would require significant international cooperation, including mediation by the United States and Gulf states, to rebuild Syria's governance and infrastructure. In this scenario, Damascus could avoid the catastrophic destruction described in Isaiah 17, instead becoming a hub for reconstruction and diplomacy. Scenario 2. Escalation of regional conflict. A more volatile scenario envisions renewed conflict between Iran and Israel, with Syria as a primary battleground. The 2024 Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Damascus, which killed senior Iranian officials, highlighted Syria's vulnerability as a strategic flashpoint. If the ceasefire breaks down, Iran may seek to reassert its influence in Syria, potentially through new proxy groups or direct military action. Israel, in response, could escalate its operations, targeting Syrian military assets or chemical weapons facilities to prevent them from falling into hostile hands. This scenario could lead to significant destruction in Damascus, aligning with the imagery of Isaiah 17, verse 1. A large-scale conflict involving Israel, Iran, and other regional actors could devastate Syria's already weakened infrastructure, reducing parts of Damascus to ruins. The involvement of external powers, such as Russia supporting pro-Iranian factions or Turkey countering Kurdish groups, would further complicate the situation, potentially drawing in global actors like the United States. Theologically, this scenario resonates with eschatological interpretations of Isaiah 17, which anticipate a cataclysmic event in the end times, possibly linked to Ezekiel 38 to 39's prophecy of a coalition against Israel. Scenario 3. Catastrophic destruction of Damascus. In an extreme scenario, a major conflict or catastrophic event could lead to the near-total destruction of Damascus, fulfilling the literal imagery of Isaiah 17. This could occur through a combination of military actions, such as Israeli airstrikes targeting strategic sites, or unintended consequences, such as the use of chemical weapons or a nuclear escalation involving Iran. The power vacuum in Syria, coupled with the decline of Iran's proxy network, creates conditions where a miscalculation could trigger widespread devastation. Such an outcome would align with the eschatological view that Isaiah 17 awaits a future fulfillment, potentially as a precursor to broader end times events. For example, some theologians connect the prophecy to Ezekiel 38 verse 5, which includes Persia in a coalition against Israel. However, this scenario remains speculative, as it would require an unprecedented level of destruction not yet seen in Damascus, despite its current instability. Theologically, this outcome would underscore the prophecy's warning against human pride and reliance on military power. Role of external powers. Russia has been a key player in Syria, supporting the Assad regime through military bases and airstrikes. With Assad's fall, Russia faces the challenge of maintaining its influence in a fragmented Syria. In 2025, Russia may seek to back a new government or faction to secure its strategic interests, particularly its naval base in Tartus. However, competition with Turkey and Western powers could limit Russia's ability to shape Syria's future, potentially leading to tensions that exacerbate conflict. Turkey's primary interest in Syria lies in countering Kurdish groups, particularly the YPG, which it views as a terrorist threat. The power vacuum in Syria provides Turkey an opportunity to expand its influence, potentially through military operations in northern Syria. Such actions could destabilize the region further, drawing in Israel or Iran and increasing the risk of conflict in Damascus. Turkey's historical role as a successor to the Ottoman Empire parallels ancient Persia's influence, highlighting the continuity of external powers shaping the Levant. United States. The United States has played a significant role in the Iran-Israel conflict, participating in strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities in 2025. As a key ally of Israel, the U.S. is likely to support efforts to stabilize Syria under a pro-Western government, countering Iranian and Russian influence. However, domestic political constraints and a focus on other global priorities may limit U.S. involvement, leaving Syria vulnerable to competing interests. The potential scenarios for 2025 invite reflection on Isaiah 17's theological significance. The prophecy's call to trust in God rather than human alliances remains relevant, urging nations and individuals to seek divine wisdom amid uncertainty. The historical fulfillment of Isaiah 17 in the Assyrian conquest of 732 BCE suggests that the prophecy may have already been partially realized, while its dual fulfillment potential allows for future significance. The current instability in Syria, marked by the fall of Assad and the Iran-Israel tensions, creates conditions where a major conflict could align with Isaiah 17's imagery, but such connections remain speculative without further developments. The stabilization scenario aligns with this message, as diplomacy requires humility and cooperation. Conversely, the escalation and catastrophic scenarios resonate with eschatological interpretations, which view Damascus's destruction as a sign of divine judgment in the end times. However, theologians caution against hastily linking current events to prophecy. The future of the Middle East hinges on the interplay of diplomacy, military strategy, and regional ambitions. A stabilized Syria could reshape the region, fostering cooperation and reducing the risk of prophetic-level destruction. However, renewed conflict could thrust Damascus into the center of a broader war, with devastating consequences. The involvement of external powers complicates these outcomes, as their competing interests could either mitigate or escalate tensions. Theologically, Isaiah 17 serves as both a historical warning and a reminder of God's sovereignty, encouraging believers to approach the future with discernment and faith. The Middle East in 2025 stands at a crossroads, with Syria's instability and the fragile Iran-Israel ceasefire shaping its future. Stabilization through diplomacy offers hope, while escalation risks devastating conflict, potentially echoing Isaiah 17's prophecy of Damascus's ruin. The roles of Russia, Turkey, and the United States will be pivotal, reflecting ancient power struggles. Theologically, Isaiah 17 urges trust in divine guidance amid uncertainty. For more insights on prophecy and geopolitics, subscribe to our channel for regular updates.